Today, we're going to talk about 5 nutrition tips for a healthy lifestyle. And it's very important for you to know this. And that's because a lot of people, they start a diet, they start a lifestyle change, and they fail. And sometimes it's not really their fault. And maybe you're in that situation. Maybe you know somebody who is in that situation. And if that's the case, maybe it's one of these 5 tips that you should know about or somebody should know about. So feel free to comment, to share it with somebody who needs to see this. Let's talk nutrition and let's talk these 5 tips. I am here with a very special guest, Tara Cassidy, and you really need to pay attention because Tara, she is an integrated health and nutrition coach, and she not only has a master's degree in health and wellness coaching, but she's also set on a board for health, national board for health and wellness coaches. So you need to pay attention. We have a big authority here, and she is talking about functional and integrated medicine all the time. That's what we are doing here in the group. So let's get started. Tara, welcome to Polish Your Life.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mike, for having me today. This is really exciting.
Thank you for coming. So maybe let's start with the 5 tips, what they are. And then after that, what we can do is we can talk a little bit more about your background, and we can talk a little bit more about some questions that people may have.
Yeah, absolutely. So my 5 tips today are increase your veggies and fruits. And yes, I did it in that order, veggies and fruits, which is increasing your nutrient density. The second one is decrease your processed foods. Number 3 is decrease your sugar intake. Read your labels. The 4th one is increase your quality of sleep. And number 5 is increase your hydration. So those are the 5 tips that we'll talk about a little bit today.
So important. So let's do this maybe. Let's talk about the first one so people can already know a little bit more about it. And then if you could share a little bit more about why you are so passionate about helping people with wellness and nutrition coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So the first one, increase your veggie and fruit intake. We're really looking at nutrient density because we don't want our plates to be monochromatic. You know, I think of my Thanksgiving table growing up where it was turkey and mashed potatoes and because Thanksgiving is coming up and the holidays are coming up, it was like all white, stuffing. There's not enough vitamins and minerals when your plate looks the same. We want really colorful plates full of food. You have a salad, it's not just a head of lettuce. We're talking shredded cabbage and tomatoes and red peppers and really adding some colors in there because your body responds more when there are more nutrient dense foods on your plate. That's not to say you can't have the turkey or the chicken or the mashed potatoes, but look at the colors on your plate. That's what increased veggies. And your fruits, you really want whole fruits, the fiber intact, a whole apple, not apple juice, an entire orange, peel it, of course, but the pith on there is the fiber that you really are looking for. So not as many dried fruits, those are great, but really focus on whole foods when you're out shopping and when you're looking at your plate.
I love it. And I love that you put it in a specific order. And I think I know why, but if you could tell our viewers why you say vegetables and fruits, not like a lot of people say fruits and vegetables.
Mm-hmm. There's still a lot of sugar in fruits, and your body and your liver have to process that. Your pancreas has to crank out a lot of insulin, even with fruit. So when we put fruit first, people go, oh, and that kind of like, in my mind, it really feeds into that sugar craving that, was so prevalent in the United States and perhaps elsewhere, but that's what I'm familiar with. And the vegetables, the nutrient density is amazing. You have so much protein and vitamin C in a cup of broccoli alone, and so adding those vegetables just allows your cells to respond the way they're supposed to. That's what our bodies know and understand.
Thank you for explaining.
Yeah.
And Tara, I have a question to you from which I would like you to also kind of like touch on your story and how
Sure.
you inspire other people to change their life and actually take action that is going to be successful. So the question is something that I think a lot of you watching, you may be in that situation or you know someone who is in that situation, and that is the difficulty in finding a specific balance. So here's my question. Let's say I am on a diet. Let's say I made a decision to change my lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then here's what happens. I'm a human being, like all of you watching, right? And I mess up. I just messed up. Okay. So I didn't stick to what I wanted to stick to. And now we have two scenarios. On one hand, we have people who tell us you need to always be kind to yourself. Okay. Don't beat yourself up. You're a human being. You're not a robot. You can't possibly be ideal. At the same time, if we are so kind that we just tell each other or tell ourselves, yes, you're just a human being, you just can't do it, nobody would succeed. So that's the one extreme side of the spectrum. And the second side of the spectrum is us just really being super stressed and then saying, like, no, Mike, you messed up. How could you? It was so important for you. You did it for your family, you did it for your health, and then you messed up, and then suddenly you can't have progress because that's also giving you the stress. So the question really is, how do you find the balance between these two to actually succeed? And then touch on your story, please.
Yeah, awesome. That's a great question, Mike, because that is um, what I deal with my clients every day, right? They come to me because they want to make change. And a lot of people, you might be like that yourself, is a perfectionist, right? I've decided this is what I'm going to do. I'm following this diet. And if I mess up, I'm bad, I'm wrong. And the shaming doesn't help us. Shaming actually increases our cortisol levels. And if our cortisol levels are increased, we're not going to lose weight. It's not possible when you get your cortisol levels so high. And that can be affected by so many reasons. Stress is one of them. Inducing stress upon ourselves is another. Not getting sleep is another, and I can go on and on. Just living here in the 21st century is enough stress, right? And then family stress. So there has to be a balance of I am committing to this and also understanding that we're not perfect and you have to be gentle with yourself. I have a client who is a professed perfectionist, and she's trying to lose weight, and she's, obese, and she beats herself up. But as we've worked together, that's become less and less so. And during a crisis, she went to McDonald's because it was like this old autopilot. And she was like, oh my God, I can't believe I went to McDonald's, and started kind of down that road. I said, well, what did you do for your next meal? And she did great, right? She had a healthy smoothie for breakfast the next meal. And then, the rest of the next day was great. So I asked her, when was the last time you went to McDonald's? And she actually had to stop and think about it because it was so long ago, right? So that changes over time. And the kindness has to come because change won't happen if you're not kind. So it's really a thin edge depending on whereupon you're coming. And so you asked about my own story, and that started in my 20s because I had my own health stuff. It wasn't a crisis. I wasn't hospitalized. But at 24, I was a party girl and did not treat myself great. I knew how to, but I was having seasonal allergies all the time, popping pills constantly. I had food sensitivities, and I wasn't really sure some food allergies, and I had chronic candidiasis. I had brain fog. I was fatigued, and I'm 24 years old. That's not right. And fortunately, I was living with my aunt in Brooklyn, who was in acupuncture school, and she introduced me to this food can heal. Food is medicine, and the energetics of food, which I had no clue about, despite having an early introduction to those food cooperatives, in the 70s when it was not the norm, before Whole Foods. And so that was the beginning of my journey of discovering food as medicine and using myself as my own laboratory. So it's been many years, and I've tried many diets and many different lifestyles, and paleo, keto. I've tried them all. Weight Watchers, grapefruit diets, pills, like all of that stuff. And there's a more natural way to do it without, counting every single calorie, which is kind of old school at this point.
Yes, and I love what you wrote. I think it was on your LinkedIn profile that you realized that as you were going through the journey, people were actually watching and paying attention. And that is something that inspired them to take action.
Yeah.
And I want all of you watching, and maybe you are dealing with a problem and you think that it's not going to be that easy to go over the hump and actually have progress. Just know that we are human beings, right? So we are not robots. It's not going to be perfect. But finding that balance between being kind to yourself and actually executing on your own dreams and decisions, that's going to be the recipe for success. And that's why it's very important to have people who are not only inspiring, but also they have tools and resources like Tara, who can help you get over that hump, who you can reach out to and have the accountability factor. You can have the knowledge, you can have the experience, and also somebody to listen to you when maybe you're not willing to share it with just everyone, and nobody seems to pay attention to the point that you would like. So coming back to our 5 tips, we talked about tip number 1. I think it's very important. So we need to eat more vegetables and fruits. Second tip would be
decrease your processed food intake. That is really challenging to do if you're in a grocery store. But my recommendation for decreasing your processed food intake is really to focus on shopping on the outside aisles of your grocery store. That's where all the electric is. That's where all your refrigeration and freezer items are. That is your best bet. Try not to eat out at fast food restaurants. It's packed with excess sugars and salts and chemicals that our bodies are storing and holding on to, and it's not as easy to excrete, especially if we're living a sedentary lifestyle. You don't get up and move as much. It's there's so much in there, and there's actually hormone disruptors in a lot of these foods as well that we're not aware of. And high fructose corn syrup is in everything. So we try to avoid that. Sugar is in everything, and it's hidden in, I think I read recently, it's over 56 different types of sugar in our foods. If it ends in OSE, it's a sugar, typically. So look out for that. It's hidden in so many foods, and we don't need that much sugar and added sugars into our lives. There's great sugar in an apple and in an orange, but trying to avoid those processed foods. And, my recommendation for my clients who are really new at this and really want to make a change is just squeeze it out with those extra veggies and fruits, and read your labels. The more that's on your label, if you are still buying stuff in packages, I do, but I know what's on there, and it sounds like real food, and there's about 5 or 6 ingredients in it. When you get into multi syllables of things in your food, it's questionable.
Yeah, very valuable for people to know. And for some of you watching, it may be obvious. For some of you, it may be a new term. So when we talk about whole foods, we are talking about not necessarily a whole food store, even though it's a very good store. We are talking about foods that really have one ingredient, like avocado, right? Or, there's this one ingredient. When we talk about packaged foods, and I love, Tara, that you mentioned it, because a lot of people don't really know what does it mean to have a highly processed food. And how do you tell? So if you pick up a food that you want to buy and there is a label that has so many ingredients and half of them you cannot even pronounce,
right,
most likely it's a heavy processed food. But if you can read the labels and you can see, for example, I don't know, dried tomatoes, okay, well, there's one ingredient here. Or if there's something that is the less ingredients and the more ingredients that you can understand, most likely that's going to be something that is better for you. And overall, even packaged foods is probably not as healthy as the real vegetable or fruit or a piece of meat. But I think it's very important for people to know that when we refer to whole foods, it doesn't mean that everything in a whole food store is whole food and healthy.
yes,
Right?
thank you for pointing that out. I forget, it's both a store and what we eat. So there's lots of, you can, in your giant food store or wherever you're shopping at Wegmans, wherever it is, shopping at the outer aisles is the most important. And like you said, Mike, picking up that can, I was surprised, a very well-known brand, can of black beans. And I was like, there's more than black beans in here. And there was about 6 items, but it was things that I didn't know what it was. And it was a lot of extra salt unnecessarily. So even something as simple as a can of black beans, read the label.
Yes, yes. And I will tell everyone that we need to also be aware that there is, like, these people who produce foods. I mean, some of them have great intentions, but a lot of them are just looking at the business model alone, and they want that food to be addictive. They want that food to have a lot of sugar, high fructose corn syrup, whether it is good for our health or if it's not. So it's important to know how to tell. And also, when you pick a food, please don't just blindly believe the label. Like when it says, low sugar, or the best is, like, I just talked to Monica. She's in Costco. She's on keto. So she grabs and says, Mike, can you believe it? Like, this product is really named keto and it has wheat in it, or sucralose.
Yeah.
How can it be keto if it has sugar, if it has wheat? Just very, very interesting, because a lot of people are going to say, I eat keto. But now you know that maybe sometimes you take something to your hand and it's not necessarily what the label promises, but we need to turn the label around. And the good thing is they have to disclose what's in the food. And then when you see, this Egyptian writing on it and you cannot really tell, oh my goodness, it's probably not good for you. Okay, great. And tip number 3, Tara.
Tip number 3 is kind of a continuation of tip number 2. It's decreasing your sugar intake. And again, we're really focusing on reading the labels. And I'm really glad that you said turn it over, because there's so many claims on the front, and that's marketing. That's great. Thank you for pointing that out. But like you said, turn it over and read the ingredients. Don't get sucked in by what's on the front. And when it says no sugar or low sugar just means it's less than their original brand. And there's a certain percentage that allows them to make that claim. Still turn it over and see what's in there. And I actually printed this out because there's so many different kinds of sugar. I was like, I have to print this out. It's ridiculous. So some basic simple sugars, and that goes in your system really fast: dextrose, fructose, galactose, glucose, lactose, maltose, sucrose. That's just your oses. Then there's solid and granulated sugars. They're still processed and still not great for you: beet sugar, brown sugar, cane juice crystals, cane sugar, castor sugar, coconut sugar, a little bit better, maybe. Confectioner sugar, that's your powdered sugar. Corn syrup solids, no, stay away. Diastatic malt, what the heck? Ethyl maltol. So also looking for the malts, and an OL at the end is often, sugar alcohols. Raw sugar, sucanate, turbinado sugar, yellow sugar. I've never heard of half of this stuff. And probably the one thing that would be okay, it's natural, it's honey and maple syrup. And again, looking at your labels, don't get the low sugar stuff where it's not really maple syrup. Look that it's maple syrup. If it gets crusty around the edges, that's great. That means it's real. If your honey gets solid, that's real honey. It's not some of this frankenfood stuff that's made up where it's partially honey and partially some other stuff. So it's actually good if your honey becomes solid. You can deal with that. You can put it in a pot of water on your stove on low. You don't want to melt anything. If it happens to be in plastic, I try to buy things in glass myself. But that's good. And there's actually there's nutrients in there that are good for us. Of course, you don't want to have a whole lot, just a teaspoon maybe. I've made lemonade with fresh lemons, water, and maple syrup. It's amazing. And it's better for you. Again, we don't want to do a whole lot of sugar and just really, and please stay away from the artificial sugars. That is like my plea to the world, because it's chemically made and our bodies just don't know what to do with it. It responds as if it's real sugar, but in the end, our bodies don't know what to do with it, and it's just toxic. Diet Cokes, Diet Pepsis, diet. It's just terrible. And I was an addict of Diet Coke back in my 20s, and just chugging them like it was candy because they were yummy. But there's that nice combination of salt and sweet in there. Like Mike said, the food companies do that on purpose to make them addictive. So, and you can pull yourself away and just know that if you do a detox to pull those sugars away, make that hard effort, but also be gentle, because sometimes those headaches are a killer when you're starting. So,
well,
yeah.
Thank you for letting us know. And also, I want people to know that many times we look at these labels and we look at the ingredients that you mentioned that are sugars, but we may not realize that some of the fruits have so much sugar that if somebody is on a weight loss, on a diet to lose weight, it is nearly impossible, if not impossible, to lose weight or a good amount of weight, even no matter how much people exercise, if they're just eating so much sugar. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I had a coworker when I was back in an office, and she took to heart the fruits and vegetables and probably ate 6 fruit a day, whole fruit, which is great, but she didn't lose a lot of weight because there was so much sugar. And citrus fruits has a lot of sugar in it. Bananas have a lot of sugar in it, and bananas can also cause like congestion. But if you're trying to lose weight, the berry family is probably your best bet. And just, a whole pint of blueberries is a serving size, believe it or not. So, just keep in mind how much you're eating, and, use it as a treat and enjoy.
Awesome. Very good. So we need to definitely reduce the amount of sugars we eat.
Absolutely.
All kinds, right? And everything in moderation. Like we say, it's not always easy to be a perfection, or like to have a perfect type of balance between having zero and having a lot. But we need to find that very good sweet spot where it allows us to lose weight, be healthy, and at the same time we got to enjoy life, right? So it's
Absolutely.
impossible to do something that is completely crazy. How about tip number 4?
So tip number 4 is increasing your quality of sleep. This is so important. So many people try to lose weight and they can't, and they don't realize that their lack of sleep or poor sleep is affecting this. And this is just for people who are trying to lose weight, but for everybody. And we talk about 8 hours being the sweet spot. It can be the sweet spot for some. 4 hours is not enough. 5 hours is not enough. And 6 hours is often not enough. Quality of sleep is the depth. It's like getting your REM sleep, your deep sleep, and your light sleep. Anybody who has a Fitbit knows this, right? Tracking your sleep. I was a long-term, what do you call it when you can't sleep?
Insomniac? Insomniac?
Oh, yeah. Terrible. I had fear of missing out, and I just didn't, I was a night owl, and I got terrible sleep. And it started in high school, as a night owl, and then you have to be in the classroom at 7:30, and it just continued. And there was a point in my life I wanted to be an elementary school teacher, but I didn't because I knew of the hours. There was no way I was getting up and being in the classroom at 7 o'clock in the morning. So I just was like, that's not my path. And here I am many moons later, and this is my path to share my own adventures. And so sleep is essential. And the other thing is, we think sleeping pills will help us, or some sleep aid. And what happens is, and I'm not a doctor, I won't claim to be one. I've just read a lot about this because of my own insomnia and those around me with insomnia. They affect your deep sleep, and you need all of those sleep cycles to ensure that you have energy the next day. So when we're missing deep sleep, we still wake up tired, and that's not helpful for good health. And alcohol is also not good for helping you sleep. Initially, it might help get you to sleep, but it's the same thing. Your deep sleep is missing. You wake up tired, and that's where the grogginess comes in, and like the hangover. Or even if you're not really hungover, you just feel like kind of gross. Your deep sleep was missing through the night. And I actually did this experiment with my mother-in-law, which was really fascinating to see this. Like, the deep sleep was like non-existent after drinking 2 glasses of wine at dinner.
That's amazing and fascinating that you bring it up. And a lot of people don't know the correlation, because we talk about 5 nutrition tips for a healthy lifestyle. And some people may say, okay, how sleep is a nutrition tip? But it is, because sleep can positively affect our digestion big time. So let's talk about that, because I think a lot of people may not know what's obvious to you. Let's explain to the viewer.
Yeah, so just lack of sleep just affects all of our bodily functions. It slows everything down when we're not getting enough sleep. And so I'm not as well versed on the digestion and sleep, but I know when I personally don't get enough sleep, my digestion's off. Things are gurgling and making noises that normally don't, right? And that kind of goes along with the chewing enough to get enough to digest, because digestion starts with our eyes. When we see it, we begin to salivate. When we begin to salivate, we're craving, we want that food, and then making sure that we actually masticate and chew it enough so that the digestion system can work fully and we get all the nutrients out of it. And the sleep cycle is all a part of that.
I love it. And the beauty of having an integrated approach, like in our doctors networking group, we have amazing doctors who talk about these individual pieces. And then in my mind, it all comes into a beautiful synergy, right, of all these individual pieces that makes a lot of sense. For example, we had Dr. Purohit from Optimal Body. She was talking about, and you can look it up. There is a video in our video gallery on YouTube about mindful eating. So you can just put mindful eating, polish your life, you will find it. Great, very quick tip from Dr. Purohit. She talks about what you talk about. So we need to actually pay attention to the moment of eating and to all the senses that are involved. We need to smell the food. You mentioned even the eyes can start the process of digestion, and you can test it yourself. When you take a lemon and you just see it, you will, even before you smell it, you will already start to salivate, right?
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
I love that you mentioned that, Mike, because I actually, during the pandemic, was teaching a mindful eating class. Part of my programming was a 10-week mindful eating class, which is really fascinating. And particularly when you're in grad school and you're like, yeah, I'm mindfully eating in front of the laptop as you're doing your homework. More recently, I was on a week-long meditation retreat, and your meals are prepared for you. They're all beautiful and tasty. And what more do you have to do when you cannot speak to the people around you? You just pay attention to what you're eating, and you eat slowly and you chew it fully, and you are just fully present with your food. And it was all vegetarian that week. And I'm not normally a vegetarian. I do eat meat in moderation and good happy meat typically. But this week it was vegetarian, and every week I was like, oh my God, I'm stuffed. And my plates got smaller and smaller because I was chewing and chewing like every single bite for an entire week. And I wasn't trying to lose weight, but I actually lost 5 pounds from chewing my food.
Thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
you know, you witnessed a moment of digression, which led to the tip number 6 of mindful eating. But it is important. Coming back to tip number 4 about sleep, and the idea of having this collaboration being such a beautiful synergy of a lot of different pieces of knowledge that are in our group, that you as the viewer and you as the Doctors Networking Group member, you can tap into that knowledge. So let's talk about Dr. Porter, who mentions, and there is a lot of research behind it, who mentions the hours of sleep are not necessarily the quality of sleep, right? So some people sleep 8 hours, but they really, which you mentioned in the Fitbit, you can tell that there is only a little bit of that deep sleep, not enough. And we need to make sure that we not only have the time necessary to spend in bed, but also the quality of sleep. And there is a lot of different factors how we can improve the quality of sleep. So if you're watching this and you're wondering how to improve that, there's also there are videos, and you can just Google Dr. Porter Polish Your Life, or YouTube it, and you'll be able to find so much more knowledge. So I wanted to get to the final tip. If you're ready, tip number 5.
Tip number 5 is increase your hydration. You know, it seems like a no-brainer, and it is so important for your cells to have water. We're somewhere between 60 and 70% water makes up our body, right? And when we don't replenish it, really fatigue sets in, and all kinds of other, you can tell when you're dehydrated, your mouth is dry, like, but by that point you're dehydrated. We don't feel thirsty per se. And so it's really important to drink roughly 64 ounces of water a day, depending on your body size. It also depends on, you know, like if you're at the beach and you're out and you're sweating a lot, or you're working out in the yard and you're working heavily, it really depends on a lot of different factors. But there's an easy formula. It's like take your weight, divide it by 2, and those are the ounces that you're drinking. So for a 150 pounds person, 75 ounces of water. And if you're more than that, and this same client that I've been working with, she's like, oh my God, I doubled my water intake because she's larger. She needs more water. She's like, I feel so much better. Like her brain wasn't as fogged, and she thought more clearly, and she had more energy. And it was like this huge aha moment. So hydration is so important. And there's a couple of great books by Dr. Batmanjali.
I was about to mention his name.
Yeah, he's got Water for Health, for Healing, for Life, and Your Body's Many Cries for Water. Great books, highly recommend them. So that's the easy rule of thumb, and go to the experts on why, and get all the science behind it. So
thank you so much. And mentioning Dr. Batman Gilic is also so important, because he's I saw a couple of his seminars. He was a genius. Like the studies and the practical applications of what he did, and just, it will sound crazy, but curing people with water and salt.
Yes.
And proving that salt is actually very necessary. It was mind-blowing, and it is mind-blowing to a lot of people. So thank you for bringing him up. That's the power of collaboration, because none of us is the ultimate knowledge expert, but collectively we can get so much knowledge and so many resources to you as the viewer, that you can get a lot of support. So anytime if you have a question, about wellness, integrative health, nutrition coaching, please feel free to reach out to Tara Cassidy. She's absolutely amazing, works with passion to improve more lives. We had conversations outside of the camera or behind the scenes, you can say. And I'm just very impressed, because knowing that somebody knows what they're doing, knowing that somebody works with passion, and at the same time that there is much more than just the act of doing what they do for a living, but actually having the joy of helping people. This is the type of people that we want to have around. So thank you so much, Tara, and let our viewers know where they can find you.
So I can be found on my website, which is CassidyWellnessCoaching.com, on LinkedIn, on Instagram and Facebook, either Cassidy Wellness Coaching or Tara Cassidy, and or email CassidyWellnessCoaching@gmail.com.
That is awesome. Really appreciate you being here, and it means a lot. And that's because we are all trying to solve a big problem here. And we notice a lot of people go to a doctor, they follow recommendations, and they still don't get better.
Yep.
And I really think this is not right. Something needs to be done to address it. So first of all, is why is that happening? And it's one of the bigger reasons is that healthcare providers don't effectively collaborate.
Right.
And I think that doing what you do, Tara, to be able to connect these different knowledge buckets, and then also being able to apply it to a single individual and add the coaching, the accountability, the support that is needed to actually bridge the gap between the decision, which is already a very important step, to success. There is a whole lot more than just deciding and executing, because we all know we all mess up. We're human beings, right? So we are doing a lot to solve this problem. And with the group, if you're watching for the first time, I highly recommend and encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Polish Your Life, to follow us on different social media platforms. And this is because if you imagine 10,000 healthcare providers and individuals collaborating, working together, sharing clinical experience, sharing the knowledge, referring to each other, and this is all to get the best clinical outcomes. If we imagine that, I think we can put a huge dent in that big problem. And right now we are at about 400 plus members at Polish Your Life Doctors Networking Group on Facebook, which I encourage you to join as well. It is not only for doctors and healthcare professionals, but also for for individuals who are looking for clinical solutions. And maybe, that's me, maybe that's you as well. So whether you're a provider or an individual, I strongly encourage you to consider subscribing, following, being part of us, and also ask questions. So below this video, the video will be done, will be posted, and then after that you may have a question. So feel free to ask a question to Tara or to myself. If you have any questions about the group, we'll be happy to answer. We'll be happy to collaborate. And till next time, thank you so much, Tara, and thank you for watching. Take care.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike.
Thank you.